So this one's interesting. We're going to talk a little bit this week about how what we've done to preserve to care for and protect our time, our attention, and our well-being during what's a pretty unprecedented time, and I reckon all of our careers. And we all have different roles, but we all encounter the same things. We all have families. We all work in a distributed environment. We're all trying to serve client needs in the same way. So as often as we have really differing points of view on these things, and we do in some of these things too, like the way Mark manages his time is not the way Julie manages her time. It's not the way but it's been it was a really fruitful discussion for us to have, and we're excited to talk a little bit about it. So we'll jump in a little bit as usual, a little bit of context around the problem we're talking about, some things that we've learned from our own experiences. We'd love to hear some of the things that you're doing that work for you, and then a couple reference materials or takeaways at the end of the conversation. So I don't think this is news to anybody, right? That we're under more stress and having to work. A lot of us are having to work differently from how we've always worked. The interesting thing with Simpraxis, I think, is that we're not working very differently. We've always had a distributed workplace. It's more distributed now than it was. Hi, Derek. But our clients have all changed, right? So the going on site at a client, the in-person meetings, the context you get from face-to-face conversations. We chatted a little bit about that on Twitter this week, Mark, I think you and I. So the present situation is acute, but some of these best practices, or what we would usually call better practices, are timeless as well.
Yeah, and it's been interesting as I talk to people, as we're getting out and doing things. It's that typical American thing. Oh, what do you do? I'm a computer nerd. Who do you work for? I work from home, but now I have to say, I work from home before it was cool. Like I was 10 years ahead of the trend. Yeah. Because a lot of the things that we do are things that people had to, and we lose that context. Like my wife it's been tough for her to figure some of that out because I've been doing it forever and she hasn't.
Right. We were preparing for a pandemic we didn't know was coming.
Yeah.
We're ahead of our time.
Yeah, Todd, the first album of Work From Home was the good stuff. The new stuff I don't like as much.
You have forever to make your first album, but then the second one is,
That's it. That's it. So we'll start with time, right? We've all got finite time on this earth and in our days. And what are some of the things that we do to protect our time? So Julie, I think this first one, you were really, I know you're really good at this, right? From having worked with you for a long time. You want to talk about it?
Tell you off on a regular basis.
You set boundaries.
That's a nice way of saying how I behave. Yeah. So I for sure struggle with being a mom, having that whole aspect of before school, after school, needing to focus on my child during those times. I absolutely set some pretty strong boundaries, but it's also more about contextualization for me, being that I code most of the time. When interrupted while coding, I think it's a Sherlock Holmes thing, but the mind pyramid of whatever I was working on just sort of falls apart for me, and I have a hard, it takes me a long time to get back into that same place. So even just the smallest interruption can make it all fall apart, and so it's tough. So I have to I'm pretty vocal about don't interrupt me and turning notifications off and everything I can do to keep an interruption from happening. For sure.
I like how Mark described working in consulting for those of us on the call who are consultants and serve multiple clients as well as your own business. It's the feeling of always feeling like you should be somewhere else, right? Mm-hmm. And managing that and building boundaries and carving out time around that, I think, is crucial. I really like one of the things we do at Simpraxis is we focus on managing outcomes, not hours. So we certainly have a goal for the amount of hours that we want to bill and the amount of revenue we want to generate, but we're primarily focused on outcomes. And that makes a big difference, I think, too.
And I think that's a tough learning curve. That learning that it's not 9 to 5 anymore. It's project A due by X. How do I get there?
Right. Yeah, there's some command performances, right? Our stand-ups our command performances, but like it might be 9 to 11, then I got to go to the dry cleaner, and then 1 to 3, and then I got to pick the kids up from school, and then and then 4 to 6, and then I got to make dinner, or like that's the new normal, I think, for us.
I think that we did sort of prepare for this without knowing we were preparing for this. I mean, we've set up a company that respects each of our individual motivations and lifestyles and all that sort of stuff. A lot of the stuff that we've been able to do is because we have control over that. We, when it came to the time for the pandemic, we didn't have to change things much because we were already, as we've said, we were already working from home. We already had incentive systems in place that make sense based on the way the group of us want to work. So it's hard when you're in a large organization to say, but I want to do it this way, when that it's not the normal way. But I do think that last bullet is a really important conversation to have with whoever your boss is, or whatever your working group is. It's as long as you get the work done, you should have a little bit of freedom at least around how you get it done, because some people are probably in this situation realizing that maybe they like to work from 11 to 1 in the morning. 11 at night to 1 in the morning. Maybe they like to get up really early and work. And so our working hours may not be the same as much as they are when we're in a physical place together.
Yep. I mean, I work with someone who has 8, 5, and 2-year-old daughters, right? If I want to get a hold of him between 6 and 8 p.m., forget it. That's sacred. But if I'm online at 9 p.m., if I happen to be, I'll see him, and I know that that's a time when I can connect with him, and we've got an agreement that like if I'm online and he is too, I'll connect with him. Now I'm not generally wanting to work at 9 p.m., but there's times when occasionally you have to, or I need to connect with him, and just knowing that and having that communicated up front is super helpful.
Yeah. One of the things we've got in our enabling tools there is a world clock app. One of the things that I've done, since I am the sole Sympraxian in the central time zone, just in Windows 10, I have added additional clocks so that if I hover over the clock in the bottom right-hand corner, it shows me 2 or 3 different clocks so I can see what time it is in Eastern and all of that. And that's helped a lot, just to kind of, just having it there reminds me not to always think in the central time zone. And when I send emails, I always make sure I specify the time. I'm free 10 CDT or 10 CST, because that's become a bigger thing.
I think
I'd be curious for Derek's input too on this, right? You're the most of an outlier now, right? time wise.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's interesting because for me, being in GMT, it's, I'm 4 to 5 hours ahead of the East Coast, 6 hours, 7 hours way ahead of Todd, so I tend to have that focus time built in because nobody that I work with is awake. So I have that sort of like at least 2 or 3 hours every morning just built in as focus time to like clear the decks. But I do try to be super conscious of this, sort of setting boundaries and expectations, because I'm ready to roll when you folks wake up. So I've already had several cups of coffee. I've got a list of things, and so I'm trying to make sure I say, "Good morning, Julie. How are you today?" versus shooting stuff over at 6 a.m. her time or 5 a.m. over her time. And that's sort of being conscious about that. I think one of the things I wanted to bring up, Mike, the answering emails after hours, is one of the things that I would always encourage the my folks that worked for me to do when I was a manager was it's totally cool to read your email after working hours if that's what you want to do. It's not a requirement, but if you start answering them, that sets a precedent and sets an expectation. And I think that's super important, because if you're constantly emailing, for us as consultants, if we're sending emails at 9 or 10 o'clock at night, that implies to the people that we are sending these emails to that we are open for business. And that gives us a hard time to then close that back down, especially if you've set up a relationship with client X that, that you'll answer emails at 10 o'clock. So unless it's an emergency. So to the enabling tools, I really like to use the Outlook delayed delivery, or set it so that it only, I'll put it in the drafts folder and send it the following morning at 8 a.m. That way I can answer it when it's fresh in my mind, but I don't set that expectation. And, I think all of this is really about setting good boundaries and setting expectations. What are your working hours? Set those in Outlook, being respectful of other people's working hours. So, you're not scheduling meetings with me at 10 o'clock my time,
Yeah. Another weird one that bit me was Outlook has the ability to define work hours and separately the ability to define meeting hours. And so
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so I got nabbed on that with Find Time because it kept scheduling me stuff for the wrong time and it was a time zone thing and all that. But then there was a separate setting for meeting hours. So something I'm a big fan of doing the business hour thing, but if it ends up not working correctly, check. There's some place you can find meeting hours as well.
Oh, that's interesting.
like
back
that.
to the managing outcomes thing. I think I want to add that, yes, we're in this unique situation, but I feel like if there were any managers listening to this after the fact, it's like, that from a managing people, especially in this now that we have this more remote working kind of environment, changing the way you manage your staff too, and changing the way you do projects could be a really great enabler to getting way better outcomes by maybe changing your mindset to be more project based, or where it was maybe like just work from 9 to 5, maybe we'll do more something like that kind of feels agile, like, hey, we got this task we need to get done and these people are going to work on it, and can we get it by this time, and then allowing more them to sort of work on it for that outcome and not just 9 to 5, did you deliver it to me on Friday, kind of thing.
I did a bunch of webinars back in the spring of 2020. I had 3 or 4 or 5 of them with Chris Bortlick and some other people. And we were talking about, how are you going to get through this really short period where we're all working from home? And I think, we now know that this period is probably not going to end anytime soon and may become more of a norm. So, the lessons that we've learned during this period ought to be lessons that we continue to apply, even if everyone starts going back to the office.
Yeah.
Can I ask if anybody's monitoring the chat? I'd love to hear from other folks on the call, the non-Simpraxians. Like some of what we're talking about may feel like an ivory tower because we have built this thing that lets us work the way we want to work. But for people who don't have that option or that opportunity, what are some of the things that you do to protect and manage your time? And feel free to come off of mute. Feel free if you want to share, feel free to throw it into the chat and we'll talk about it there too.
Somebody just posted that about their former manager would call every Friday afternoon just to chat. And then after the first couple times, it became expected. So back to that's a great example of if you set that expectation by answering, now it's there. And that's painful.
Also, managers shouldn't, as a manager, you should not be calling people at 4 or 5 o'clock on a Friday afternoon just to chat.
Absolutely, but
yeah,
kudos to
managers
are
for
lonely.
reaching out.
Maybe
Chris,
they're lonely.
Krista has her hand up. Krista, do you want to chime in?
Yeah, I just wanted to. There's a couple of things on my end. My boss has a number of. Sometimes she'll do some work outside of the quote unquote normal working hours, and she and some others have started adding disclaimers to their email that says, just because I'm sending you a message during this time, I don't expect you to respond, or something along those lines, which is kind of interesting. And I know on my own end of things, for my mobile device, I usually do have Teams notifications turned on between specific hours and turn them off on the weekends. And that's been a bit of a relief because there is still stuff that if I do walk away from the computer for a minute, I'll still be able to get that information. But if I'm away from the computer for the day, I don't need to deal with that on an urgent basis. So that's been quite handy for myself.
Yep. That's another place where you can change the notifications more specifically, set the working hours for notifications in Teams. That's definitely a good tip.
I think knowing your team members is crucial there, because Julie, I can remember a pretty difficult conversation between us where I asked you for something when I knew you were busy, but I wanted to get it into your backlog and into your queue. And that was really hard for you to know that that's hanging out there and having that hanging over your head. I think you paid a significant mental price for that, and obviously I became aware of it, and changed the behavior. Like shoveling your stuff into someone else's inbox for them to deal with is not always the right way to queue up work. So that Outlook delivery delay has helped me a lot too in interacting with folks like Julie who are staging their time very carefully, and also with folks certainly in Europe and in my case Japan. It's helped a lot.
I will add to that. I heard a thing a long time ago that really impacted me, and it was a phrase something to the effect of, one of the biggest mistakes we make is to assume our experience is universal. And that really shapes a bunch of things. And in this context, for Mike, having that list of mental tasks ahead to look forward to probably doesn't cause him stress. And so he's like, hey, I want to get on Julie's backlog. He knows what works for him, so he drops it in her bucket. And so that's a good place to start from, but just understanding that just because it doesn't bother you doesn't mean it doesn't bother somebody else, and being compassionate about that, and just understanding that it's okay if Julie's mind works differently. Because I'm more like Julie. Like if I've got a list of 15 things that I know people are waiting on, drives me crazy. Like I just feel the physical weight of that, but it doesn't bother my wife at all. Just she's
it absolutely is debilitating. And this is like a housework thing for me. Like my husband doesn't get it. He's like, why can't you just sit here and have a cup of coffee? I'm like, because the dishes need to be done and the laundry needs to be done and this needs to be clean and I have to clean that bathroom and this has to, and he's like, you're nuts. And I'm like, if it's all done, if everything that I put on my mental to-do list for the day is all done, now I can put my feet up with the best of them. But that to-do list that I put for myself has to be done. So when somebody injects into my to-do list, giving me extra work, that's like significant stress for me. So
you're more of an inbox 0 kind of person, and I'm more of an inbox 15,000 kind of person.
You mean there's a way to count how many things are in your inbox?
Let's go to attention management a little bit. Some of the ways that we manage our attention in a world where, like every day, more and more stuff is demanding our attention, and Silicon Valley and other big tech kind of traffics in our attention and monetizes it. What are some of the things folks are doing to have some success in staying on task and on point?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've hit the notifications one. That one is tough because much like Julie, if I see that unread thing anywhere, Teams, Outlook on my phone, whatever, I can't focus on anything until that's gone. And so I was saying in the chat room that I'm setting up a new phone, one of those cool folding phones. But every app that I install turns on every notification for every single thing that it can possibly notify me on, and it's just maddening to do that. So I've just, I worked past this a long time ago, but just making it okay to not get notifications on everything, or like Krista said in Teams, only getting them between certain times. I've just made peace with that. Just kill the notifications.
And when notifications don't work, I feel like I'm going to lose my baby mind. I've uninstalled an app that I couldn't get the notifications to work, right? I'm like, it just has to leave my phone. I can't handle this. I keep looking at it going, there's something there. No, I know there's not something there. It's like Pavlovian or something. Ugh, it's terrible.
I think, Krista makes a good point in the chat. She's blocking off Mondays and Fridays to do actual work. For me, I tried that. It became less successful the more projects I had, but it is a really good idea, especially if you're in-house, to just sort of block out focus time. I would challenge you to the term actually do work. I had somebody tell me, as a manager, it's your job. Going to meetings is your job. That is your work. But, so
if you're a project manager, which is defined as it's a series of interruptions interrupted by other interruptions is the definition of project management, which is hard, right?
Yeah. But scheduling out that time to just put your head down and focus is really, really important.
Yeah. How many organizations, I'm curious, does anyone have organizations that support a meeting-free day? I know there's some organizations who will do, no meetings on Fridays, or no meetings on Thursdays at all.
Some different departments in our organization have implemented that, but I work at a university, so it's not a across the board type of thing. It's more on a case by case basis.
School by school or department by department.
Well, that generally works best in a work group, right? Because you actually have to get agreement from everybody who's
Yes.
sort of signing the manifesto on that.
Yeah, there's a group in Microsoft with that. And then one of the persons that I talked to that's in that group says, yeah, we're supposed to have meeting free Friday. And then my boss scheduled a meeting for 12:30 on Friday. I'm like,
Right.
oh.
Yeah, you
Well,
all
so
have to
much
play
for
by
that.
those rules.
Mhm.
Yeah.
This is one of those things where I always have to say I'm the outlier. I find myself getting really distracted when I'm not getting distracted. If I'm trying to sit there and focus, my mind starts to wander. So I sort of work grays, right? I go from project to project to project on purpose because it actually makes I feel, and I've been doing it this way for a long time, that it makes me more effective at each one. Everyone else that's in praxis thinks I'm insane. But I think, all of these things, and just Mike said this up front, there are things that work for some people and some things that work for other people, and you have to figure out which ones are right for you. My attention blocking, my willingness or interest in multitasking, I know is not like other people. So I certainly can't ask other people to do it. And so that's the other part of it, is you have to be clear on what the people you work with are comfortable with doing and accommodate that politely, not ridiculing like we usually do with Todd. Oh, sorry, Todd, you're here.
I thought we were going to pick on Mike. I thought we all got together and agreed that it was Mike.
Sometimes, Todd, if you're sitting at the poker table and you don't know who the sucker is, guess what?
There's no sucker at the table, right?
That's
It's just a
right.
sucker-free
Exactly.
table.
Exactly it,
Yeah,
Todd.
that's
You
what-
clear
you keep
answer
thinking
to
of
that.
Only the kind of games that I go to are the sucker-free tables. I've got a great record.
Can we talk about the? I know that we said this might be a bit of a luxury. This is the last bullet here about a physical workspace that's free from distractions. Not everybody gets to do this, right?
I think each of us have done this in our spaces, and we've actually sort of shown each other our workspaces, so we know. We're lucky because we don't live in small apartments or whatever, so we each have our own. Well,
Yeah, I was just going to say.
Derek's adjusting this, but we've tried to carve out some space in our house where we can be in that space or leave that space. Yeah. And I've worked with some clients over the course of this thing where they're like sitting in their middle of their dining room, or their living room, and it's just like the center of their apartment or their house. And I think that makes it much harder to
You
try
feel
to
like you're always at work,
right. You need a separate space, or at least to shift your mindset.
So I used
it's helpful to have.
Mark sort of brought that up. So I mean, before I moved, I had a dedicated office. It was lovely. I could close the door, and when I was off work, I closed the door. I couldn't hear anything. Nothing happened. I had my phone, whatever. But now that I moved, I have a much smaller apartment, and currently my office is in my bedroom, and not great. So one of the things that I try to do is, I try to make sure that I shut the computer down at night. And I think this is probably on the next slide, but I make sure the computer is off or on silent. I close it. I physically close it down. I close down the second monitor so that it looks closed. So I try to at least. I tried to get my husband to get me to buy a Soji screen, and that was not flying. So, I do what I can to close it down and make a space to just call workspace so that I'm not constantly working.
I think there's even the smallest space. There's maybe an argument to be made to moving to an outside wall, if that makes sort of sense, right? To a corner or an outside wall. If you're in the center of the living space, there's no way to escape, by going into part of a bedroom, in the bedroom, in a closed, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's maybe an argument to try to find. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. A corner or an exterior wall is different than the middle of the dining room table. And
exactly.
If you got to be in the dining room table, do your best to pack that stuff up at the end of the day so you can use it for something else, even if it's just holding some groceries or plates.
we've got to move on to well-being, but quick shout out to Todd, who has the intrusion detection system set up for creating the workspace free from distractions. Todd, can you do the 1 minute summary of that?
Yeah, I had some cheap LED string lights that I put around. Both my wife and I work in the basement, and so I put those around the door that goes to the basement, and then my wife and I both can control that. And that was, a year and a half ago when everybody was just trying to figure this out, to kind of give our kids some idea when it was okay to run down the stairs screaming, hitting each other with chairs, and when it was less okay. And it's never been a hard and fast rule, and my kids ignored it almost immediately. But it was fun. It added a little bit of frivolity to this whole big mess. But I know a lot of people do that seriously. They have hue lights or something sitting outside their office so that their office mates or housemates know the difference between the doors closed because dad's paying attention, to the doors closed because dad's on the air or something. So there's a lot of ways to do that.
All right, so let's touch on well-being. I think we've talked about communicating expectations and being consistent, and also deciding what's non-negotiable. I think that was something that we said was critical. Turning the machine off, we talked about. Be present when you're there, but be away when you're not there. Having that time to recharge and recover.
I think that's the big argument to putting the phone down, which is there's two aspects of it, right? There's the social media doom scrolling, and then there's but it's also your work tether. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Same
back
device.
to sort of my problem. If I see something off hours on Teams that ends up being a task for me, just screwed myself, right?
Nice shot.
Now that's in my head, and I can't get that out of my head, and I might as well just go sit down and do it because it will kill me. So I think the putting the devices away thing is probably,
And I love the apps that forced you to do that. Right, the mobile device well-being apps that tell you that there's a screen grab on here, which I have kind of graffitied in this way. The way
I love that book.
the way the app.
Me too.
The way these apps work. Is anybody on the call using the virtual commute capability or the Headspace integration with Microsoft 365?
I haven't.
I've not looked at it.
I'm a Headspace subscriber, but I did it long before it was part of Microsoft 365.
Mark says occasionally.
Okay. Anything else about well-being that we should touch on? I think we hit on some of them in earlier slides, so it's not as long of a slide, Bob.
I think we hit them all.
Yep.
We curated we're all well-being then, right? We're good.
We curated some pretty good resources on this one. So while we wrap up here, I found actually a maturity model-ish thing about, and I really like that they call it distributed work, not remote work, not hybrid work. Like, it's distributed. This is the company that owns WordPress, and I don't think they have an office. They're valued at like $3 billion or $30 billion now, some insane amount of money. They do a really nice job with a maturity model kind of stance on this 5 levels of remote work.
Interesting.
This is the Microsoft Workplace Analytics and Viva Insights summary. There's a woman named Mara Neville Thomas who's written extensively several books on attention management and why it's more useful and more valuable than time management. I recommend reading anything of hers. She's outstanding. Daniel Pink wrote a great book on timing called When, and that's everything from when I should do certain tasks relative to my own circadian rhythms versus when I should want to be the first person to be interviewed or the last person to be interviewed. When you want to go for surgery, you generally want to go first thing in the morning. Pro tip. Really great book about timing and time. It's really good. And then, of course, a link to our World Clock app in the PNP repository for folks.
Yep. Which is so
Any
much
other
more
questions
than
about resources?
One thing I want to make sure we put in here is the recordings for these. I want to make sure we
didn't do that, Derek. Sorry. Yep.
So yeah. So we do a recap of these as well as post the videos on our website. They generally take about a week for us to like do the recap and edit the video and get it up on YouTube. And then we'll post that when it's up to Twitter. So just be aware that if you missed a piece or if you want to look at any of the previous ones, those are on our website in the Ask Some Praxis section.
Sorry, do we throw them in the group chat too for this?
I
Teams
can't.
chat
What
for this?
the Teams chat for
the URLs to things when they post?
Sure.
Yeah,
I did last
post
week.
the video
I can
the
start
same
doing them.
day. The video
that's
goes
awesome.
up on YouTube the same day, but the summary doesn't come till for about a week.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you subscribe to our YouTube channel, you'll get the video that day. And
Cool.
But
So we're near the top. Go ahead, Joy. I'm sorry. Excuse me.
we can put them in the chat too. That's a good idea.
I'll put the link in when it's posted.
Thanks, Eric. So we're near the top of the hour. 2 weeks from today, a topic that we thought would be interesting, and we've heard this from several clients, right? Why do I need an intranet when I can have an all-company team set up for my organization? So why bother with intranets at all? And that's a question that we know has been asked at the highest executive levels within Microsoft. And there's some good reasons why and why not. We'd love to talk about them. So the intranet is dead, long live Teams. And I wanted to make sure the sarcasm tag goes in there for people who don't have the context that you do on this call. And that's what we'll be talking about in 2 weeks. We look forward to that. Please bring your ideas and your thoughts and your controversial positions.
Awesome.
Anything
See
else?
everybody next time.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate you joining us.
Bye, everybody.
Take care of
Bye.
yourselves. Bye.
Yeah.